Hi everyone, welcome to our step-by-step webinar series, Step 5, Exporting Data in Covidence. My name is Laura Meller, I'm the head of the community support team here and I'm based in the UK. I'm joined today by my colleague Ida Iskandarani, community manager, also in the UK. On today's call we also have Covidence community managers Delindia Green-Lachlan and Razia Aliani to answer your questions. Today's session is being run in standard webinar mode. All attendees are muted. Ask questions whenever you like in the questions box, which you should be able to see on the right-hand side of your screen. If we don't have time to answer your question before the session ends, we will contact you directly afterwards. You will also receive a recording of this webinar by email, and we'll also make the slide deck available too. So I'll just give a little bit of background information about Covidence for anyone here who is not already familiar with the platform. Covidence is a not-for-profit organisation and our mission is to change the way the world creates and uses trustworthy knowledge. Covidence was created by and for the research community and is designed to streamline the systematic review process as well as help you with individual tasks involved in screening, full text review and data extraction. So the platform allows our review teams to significantly reduce the amount of time they spend on reviews, helping them to get more done in less time. We've got a full-time team based around the world, continuously working on improving the product. The platform is entirely cloud-based, and we support the world's largest review community, more than 300,000 users around the world. So to talk about what we're going to cover today, the focus of our session is exporting your data from Covidence Extraction 1. We'll be covering exporting to RevMan Web and outcome types, as well as other export options. We're going to give you a live demonstration, and we'll also preview the improvements that are underway in setting up a template in Data Extraction 1. So we'll show you what's in development here at Covidence and what you can look forward to in the way of new feature releases. So before we start any of that, we're just going to run a couple of polls. The first one should be appearing on your screen now. So I'll give you a couple of seconds to have a think about that and respond.
Something went wrong. Sorry.
Okay, sure. So we're just gonna open the poll now. Yeah, you should be able to see it on your screen. If you could take a couple of seconds to answer that, we'd appreciate it. Great, we'll close that in just a couple of seconds. About 80% of you have now voted, and we can see from the results that most of you, so over 70% of people who've dialed in today, haven't used Covidence Data Extraction 1 before. So that gives us a good idea of the level and the experience of the platform, which is really useful to us as presenters. So thank you very much for that. Okay, then I'm going to give an overview of Extraction 1 in Covidence. This is a tool that's designed specifically for intervention reviews. So it follows a standardized PICO structure, which can support intervention reviews. And it's also the recommended tool for anybody conducting a Cochrane review because it has an export pathway to Review Manager or RevMan. And I know that's probably of interest for lots of you here today. So in Data Extraction 1 in Covidence, when you start to export your data, the first study that you take on will become your template for that review, for the data extraction and for the quality assessment. So that's shown in the screenshot that you can see in front of you now. And in Extraction 1, the process of both data extraction and quality assessment has a couple of stages. So the first stage is the extraction itself. This has to be performed by 2 reviewers working independently to produce their own set of data. The second step is the consensus stage. So this is where one person reviews the 2 sets of extracted data and decides on the final data set. And it's that consensus data that is included in your review and exported from Covidence. Currently in Extraction 1, changes that you make to your template are not retroactive. So that means that if you edit the template, the changes are applied to the template itself and to any studies that have not yet started extraction. But if you have studies that you've already worked on and you've already extracted data for, those template changes will not apply to those. Changes to those studies will need to be made individually. It's important that you check which version of data extraction you're using in Covidence. So you can check this in the settings section. Extraction 2 is the default tool in Covidence for data extraction, unless you're conducting a Cochrane review. If you ticked the box in Covidence to say that your review is a Cochrane review, then the default for you will be Extraction 1, which is what we're talking about today. So once consensus has been completed, you can export your data from Extraction 1 into a CSV file or to Excel. And we support the following 4 options for that. The first is a custom CSV for import to RevMan Web. The second is a standard CSV that you can then take from Covidence and upload into other statistical programs. There is thirdly an Excel option, which gives you data 1 study per sheet. And finally, we have the option of exporting to RevMan 5. Please note with this option that RevMan 5 is no longer supported by Cochrane, but Covidence still provides that option. So Gida is going to take us through all of these in more detail. Over to you now, Gida.
Thank you, Laura. So the next part here, what we're going to talk through is today's the outcome types that we support into our Extraction 1. So we support continuous and dichotomous outcome types for outcomes reported against an arm or an arm versus reference arm, but also known as effect estimate, which is also known as a contrast level data in RevMan Web. So what is really the difference between arm level data or an effect estimate? So arm level data are the data for all study intervention arms when available, such as number of cases or events for each arm, or mean effect sizes for each arm. However, the contrast level data, also known as the effect estimate, is if only effect estimates for comparing the intervention arms are available. Example, the mean difference, adjusted odds ratio, or hazard ratios. So what I'm going to show you today, I'll demonstrate how to add the contrast level outcomes, or also known as effect estimates, through data extraction 1, and show you how arm level data as well look like in or reported in extraction 1. So I'm going to switch over to the platform. Okay, sorry. Okay, so this is a demo review that is already in progress in Covidence, and what we're going to look at again, it's our extraction 1 format. So here I have my included studies, and what I'm going to show you now, I'm just going to go through the data extraction template, which is for my study Lopez 2009. So as Laura just demonstrated as well, the very first study you start working on and data extraction and or assessing the quality of this study in extraction 1 will be actually assigned as your review templates. So in this case, I have this study now assigned. So I started data extraction, and then review template was started, and I started the quality assessment on this study. So now it's also assigned as my review template for my quality assessment. So I'm going to click on this, the data extraction. And this is really the view you'll see, the PDF on the left side, and then on the right-hand side is going to be your data extraction form. And there's a summary page here of all the information extracted. The first section is about talking more about identification, where you collect study information about, let's say, author details, country, settings, etc. Their methods, which we report the study design, information, as well as any additional methods data. And population, your inclusion criteria, exclusion criteria, as well as the additional characteristics of baseline characteristics of your population. And next is the most important here section is your interventions. So in this case, in this demo, I've got 2 interventions here, the vitamin C and my placebo. So in this case, if I can go to my outcomes, so I will need to add my outcomes as either dichotomous or continuous, depends on what are my outcome types. So in this case, I currently have 2 types of outcomes, the duration of cold and the number of colds. And my duration of cold at the moment is an actual continuous outcome. And I'm just gonna demonstrate how this can be. So this is an arm level data. You'll see that arm versus an arm information on the mean and standard deviation and the population sample size. So this is a continuous data at the moment, continuous outcome. So if I click on that similar outcome and I just want to switch it across to an effect estimate, let's say, if that's reported, I can keep the name of the outcome, let's say continuous outcome, and just then I would want to choose, instead of the outcome type, to be reported against an arm, I wanted an arm versus a reference arm or effect estimate. And then here you'll be able then to select from this option to either have the 95 confidence intervals reported or your standard error, and you'll choose how these will be reported as. And all of these options are supported by RevMan Web. So you can choose from how your outcome is going to be reported as the outcome measure. So in this case, I'm happy with mean difference, let's say, and confidence interval. And then you will be prompted to choose your reference arm. So in this case, you select either vitamin C or placebo, but I will select the placebo. So in this case, I'm just going to click on save, and this is now, it's just switched over to an effect estimate, and I can actually enter any type of information in here. So let's say, okay. So this is technically just how I can report an effect estimate as a continuous outcome. But what I also can do is, let's say I want to report dichotomous outcome, then as an effect estimate. So I have the number of calls. It's also reported as an arm level data in this case. So an arm versus vitamin C versus a placebo. So I can just edit this and go to the number of calls and just select dichotomous. It's already selected for me, and just switch to arm versus reference arm, let's say, and just choose as well again how it's reported as from here. And all of these options are the outcome measures that are reported for effect estimates and also supported by RevMan Web. So probably I'm happy with risk ratio, and then I choose my reference arm as a placebo, and then I go ahead and save. I'm just gonna not save at the moment, and I will do, what I'll do now as well is, oops, okay, sorry. I'll just go back and see if I can reverse this as well, just to make it back to the arm to be reported as how it was, reported as in the beginning. And just, yeah, I'll have all of this reversed, so I can just make sure that I have all of this data added. So let's say I just put some numbers here. Okay, just to make sure. And then I need to make sure if I save that, I go into then my consensus to make sure that all of these data are populated. So these are missing. So Geeta has, myself, I've actually extracted data, Rachel hasn't, but I want to make sure that everything is actually populated into my consensus. So that's how I can go to my consensus and make sure that I resolve the consensus, and reviewer 1 or 2 can actually resolve the consensus as well. So that's how exactly what I did, and I just click on complete. So this is just an example of demonstrating how this would look like really when you start actually extracting your data and supporting your outcomes as well in extraction 1. So what I'll take you through now is actually the second section of our webinar, which is exporting these outcomes or all of this information into RevMan Web. But before we actually go into the live demonstration, I want to share this actual slide with you, and I'm probably sure some of you have actually attended the recent webinars done by Cochrane, which has recently given some webinars on their updated review workflow. And this really, we wanted this slide in particular, we wanted to actually show it as it actually to make sure that we demonstrate where Covidence fits into this process as well. So today we will focus on extracting the data, as I just did, from Covidence, and how you can really export this data to RevMan Web. And this data, of course, is formatted in a readable format for RevMan Web import. So we'll see how this really looks like and how that the both softwares now integrate together in terms of the process of importing data to RevMan Web. So as I just said, we've introduced the ability to download completed data extractions and quality assessment forms, also known as risk of bias forms, when using Extraction 1 in a format that can be uploaded and compatible with RevMan Web. And once you successfully completed this process of exporting your CSVs, all the data you collected in your Covidence review will be added to your RevMan Web review, and you'll be ready to proceed with setting up your analyses. So what the process really requires is creating or downloading from Covidence 4 CSVs, which are the study information, study arms, study results, and risk of bias for quality assessment. And then you will need to map data exported from Covidence to what you've defined in RevMan Web by following the steps that we will just go through in a moment. And once you import these 4 CSVs to RevMan Web, all new studies in the CSV will be created as included studies in RevMan Web with characteristics, results, and risk of bias data. You can then create the relevant analyses by pulling in all the data stored against your included studies. So we'll demonstrate this as well live today for you. So switching back to the actual platform. So I'm back to my actual extraction section here. And one thing you need to really make sure before you export your actual information or CSVs to RevMan Web is you need to make sure that you've actually completed the consensus form in all of your included studies. So in this case, I have all my studies under the complete list tab, nothing under extract or comparison tab. Next, you need to check in some cases that your included studies might have a missing study ID. And what I mean with study ID is that it's the last author name or and year, like this one, Lopez and Clegg 1975. So they might be blank. And this is something it really happens in some cases, but nothing to worry about. You can always contact support team to really make sure that we can actually fix that for you as well. So once this is ready, I just go now to the review dashboard, and from there I click on the export button. So you'll see the options to export your data from several places, but what's most important at that point, that will go to the Export to RevMan Web tab. So in this case, we recommend the very first thing that our users read the step-by-step guide that before starting this process that we actually have. So once you click on this, it will take you to the knowledge base article that has a very much detailed step-by-step information about the actual process that we're just going to go through now. So once you click on the export the RevMan Web files here button, as I'm just going to do now again, this will download the actual 4 CSVs from your Covidence extraction format. So this is the study information, study arms, and study results and risk of bias. And the case there's a Covidence CSV that says study custom results that is actually exported. This means that some data like custom measures that were added in Covidence will need to be manually added into RevMan Web. So if you have not added those, in which is really in the majority of cases, then we won't create this file. So this is just to make sure that any data that you add into Covidence will be exported out and the data don't get lost through the process. So the next thing I need to do is then open the CSV separately in a Google Sheet, for example. So in this, of course, once you download these CSVs, I just did that already just beforehand, and I uploaded just these. I opened actually these CSVs in a Google Sheet, and I'm able then to see them one by one. So the first one I uploaded into my Google Sheet was the study information sheet. So this is in the format that RevMan Web requires, as you can see. And we have 3 studies that were actually included, and all of this data is required again by RevMan Web. Next is the sheet for my study arms. So in this sheet, we've got the studies as well included, as well as the arms, description, and intervention columns. And again, this is what is needed for the RevMan Web import. Next is the study results data sheet, where again, all of these studies as well are included. And this time we've got some key outcomes measures like arm level data, and as well as the contrast level reported against our duration of cold and number of colds. So these are my outcomes and how the data type are reported. So you will see how this will look like just as well on the sheet. if it's also a contrast level, which will mean this is an effect estimate data. And finally is the risk of bias sheet. Again, here you've got the columns as well required by RevMan Web. We've got the studies column as well, my studies included, and their domains, and any outcome groups that are associated with this judgment. And let's say if you've added any supporting comments as well, it will be exported in the supporting in the support column here as well, supporting comments for the judgment. So next, I'll now go to my RevMan Web dashboard. And again, if you have, let's say, Cochrane credentials at the moment that I've used myself, I've actually then had access to the RevMan Web at the moment. So this is how it will look like. So this is your dashboard. But then what's important is, like, when I have to actually look at my included studies, it will say in the very beginning 0, because I haven't yet imported anything yet into RevMan Web. But then what you can still start doing is defining your PICO through the review criteria and looking into your review criteria here. So in this case, I've also added the vitamin C and my placebo, and these are my interventions. So I'll add these in the interventions section here in the review criteria in RevMan Web. And then what I'll need to do is in the study arms CSV, so I'll have to do some work here in my CSV. So I'll go to the study arms CSV. You'll notice that, again, what you've added in Covidence were all exported and populated in the arms column. But the intervention column here is yet to be blank. So what you need to do is you need to map the arm column to review level interventions, and that you've actually defined in RevMan Web. So I need to actually add these to the intervention column here. So I'm gonna do that now. So now I've mapped what I have in my arm level, that whatever I've exported from Covidence into my review level RevMan Web information. And this will ensure then that the interventions defined in the review level PICO and RevMan Web are mapped in the study arms column that were added in Covidence. So this is something that we need to be aware of. And again, make sure that the intervention names added to the CSV must match the ones in the RevMan Web as well. Exactly the same spelling, no spaces. And this is just to make sure that we don't have errors when you try to import the CSV into RevMan Web. Next is the outcomes. So in this case, I again need to add my outcomes, which in this case are the duration of colds and number of colds, outcomes in RevMan Web. So, and again, the outcomes can always be found in the same section in the review criteria here, section from my PICO. And then what I need to do is also check the outcome names captured in Covidence match the ones in RevMan Web. So if I go to my study results, CSV, make sure all the outcome names match the ones in RevMan Web. And again, make sure that the outcomes you've extracted map across the review level outcomes, and make sure that any data that you do not want to upload it into RevMan Web is to be removed from your CSV, and vice versa. If you've added anything additional to your CSV, let's say that probably wasn't in Covidence and you decided to add it, you need to make sure it is exactly added again into RevMan Web as well before uploading. And one thing I want to mention as well, once we go back to the CSV, let's say if you've added multiple time points. So at this point, in this particular example, the outcomes are at baseline. So there's no time points. I haven't added any time points. But if you have, let's say, duration of cold at 6 months, let's say, and you've exported this into Covidence, so this will be exported from Covidence study results CSV as a separate outcome. And this means that this outcome need to be added as well here. So it will reflect that you have a different outcome as well. So if you've added multiple time points for an outcome, these need to be added into RevMan Web as well as separate outcomes. And make sure that, again, the names in the CSV match those in RevMan Web. And of course, make sure that the outcome types are correct as well. So in this case, my duration of cold was reported as a continuous outcome, and my number of colds is my dichotomous outcome at that stage. And one final thing I needed to add as well with the study results CSV is all of these different data from different outcomes are all in one sheet, and all of these data, you can create several analyses into them in RevMan Web. Let's say if you want to create any sensitivity analyses, any subgroup analysis, let's say if you had the covariates and so on, all will be exported outside of Covidence in one CSV sheet that is compatible with RevMan Web, and they can all produce different analyses, separate analyses in RevMan Web. So next is what I like to do is still, before I switch to my risk of bias, is under characteristics, you will notice there's a field that we actually have in Covidence, which was called the identification. So if I go to my CSV study info, you'll notice there is this identification section here, which contained information about the sponsorship, let's say, or country, or author details, and so on, about my actual review. And I didn't really, it's actually set up in Covidence, but as you can notice here, it's not set up by default as a default field in the RevMan Web study characteristics table. So what you need to do, and to enable the data captured in Covidence to be exported, you need to actually, through the review criterion and navigating through the characteristics tab here, you need to add it as a characteristic definition. So this is what I'm going to just do now. I'm just going to add it and call it identification. Okay. So now I have this already ready for me. So identification is now added, and this will help me import the data that I've actually collected under identification and Covidence to RevMan Web. And then finally, last but not least, is the risk of bias domains. So and the outcome groups, of course, are captured in Covidence needs to match those in RevMan Web. So if you're, let's say, again, using Cochrane risk of bias version 1, which is the default in Covidence extraction 1, then you do not need to edit anything on RevMan Web. As you can see, they are exactly the same domains as Covidence as well. But if, let's say, you use the custom template and you added additional domains, you need to make sure that any domain that you add in your risk of bias, let's say, are added as well here as an additional domain in the RevMan Web. And of course, last but not least as well, what you need to make sure as well here is the outcome groups. You need to make sure you add these with any related outcomes groups as well for your domains. So in this case, you added, let's say here, all outcome groups for my blinding of participants and personnel. You linked all outcomes to the blinding of outcome assessment. And finally, to my complete outcome data, my attrition bias. So I need to also add these here. So if I already added these, but if you want to, you can click on the edit button and just select the outcome name from here. So I'm assessing the domain or the quality for all my outcomes for this particular domain, similar to the blinding of outcome assessment for my detection bias, and finally for my incomplete outcome data as well, attrition bias. So I'm going to use all my outcomes and assess the quality of all my outcomes in this case. So after I've checked also the domain names, they need to also match exactly the ones in the CSV. So ensure that the domains names match with the ones in RevMan Web, as you can see. And this is, again, for not to really have any errors, and that you include all the group all outcomes in this case. So this is the setup really of the PICO, and you make sure you map this across. Again, this gives you the opportunity to tidy up the data and make sure that the data exported in Covidence map those in RevMan Web. So I make sure my interventions look the same, my outcomes are okay, all the same and compatible with what I have in my CSV. I added identification under the characteristics table here in review criteria, and made sure that my risk of bias domains are exactly the same and assigned to their outcomes as well. And what I finally did as well here is I've added some analyses. And of course, again, you do not need to add this before the import, but you can do as I've just done. So as you can see, I've got the number of calls as my duration of calls are my outcomes, and I already added these in my analyses. You will actually notice that you have 0 studies, so there's no any kind of analyses yet imported to RevMan Web because we haven't done any import yet. But you'll notice that these are, once you actually import the CSVs from Covidence into RevMan Web, this will automatically populate your analyses. So that's why I prepared them beforehand, but it's not absolutely, it's up to you. You can do that before, or you can set up the analyses after you import your data. In any case, it will be automatically populated for you with all the data included from your studies. So once you've cross-checked now, I'm going to go back to the CSVs. I made sure that, let's say everything's okay, and I need just to make sure that I download them all again. I cross-checked the study information, study arms, results, and risk of bias information CSV with what they are matching with RevMan Web, and then I'll be ready then to download them again and import them into RevMan Web. So I will do that now. So I will go to download and make sure, of course, I download in the CSV format. So this is my study info. Because I did some changes to my actual CSV file, especially the study arms, I need to make sure I download the new form, the new updated CSV. I'll do the same for my study results and my risk of bias. So now going back to RevMan Web, I'll go to my dashboard. It's time to actually import these CSVs into RevMan Web, and by default study-centric data will be anyway enabled, so you don't have to enable this feature. And then now I'll import this study data. I'll click on import from template. I'll start with uploading my study information. So in this case, okay, so I'm in my downloads. Okay, just make sure that I have the recent one. So this is my study info. I open it, no errors found, that's perfect. I go to the next one, which is my study arms. So I just make sure that it's already, yes, it has everything already there, perfect, no errors found. I go to my study results, CSV, just make sure everything's right there, okay, great. No errors found, risk of bias as well. And I click no errors found. This is perfect. So if there are errors, it might be because the data in the CSV does not match what is in RevMan Web. So you need to make sure interventions and outcomes match before you import into RevMan Web. So in this case, I'm good to go with importing my study into RevMan Web. I click on OK. Then the actual the import is complete, and total of studies found are 3. This is perfect. That's exactly what I'm looking for. So just to make sure that this is actually okay, so I go back to my studies included, and I just see now that all my 3 studies that I've actually exported their data from in Covidence are already here. So if I need to check more of what actually was exported and imported into RevMan Web, I can see all the information about my identifier methods, participants are there, my risk of bias. This is just a summary. If I go to edit study, I'll go more in depth into the review criteria and just check on the general information, all of these characteristics as well of my study, covariates if there's any, study arms as well, which are my interventions, and results data, most importantly, my duration of cold, contrast level data, and just in this case, or let's say risk ratio for my number of colds. If I go to next, I go to the next study, and there's some arm level data that will just appear as exactly as in Covidence arm level data, how it's reported with all the data, and finally my risk of bias. So next, now you'll notice on the analysis section, because I already set up my analyses, the information then will actually appear here now, and it will be already populated. So now it will say 3 studies are actually imported, and now we have 267 participants, and I have my risk ratio. So for that particular, let's say, I'm just going to click on edit analysis. You'll see that this is exactly what I just added beforehand. Sorry, back to analyses. But if you want to know more about, so this is just the actual final information. You can see this is exactly my 3 included studies and all the data included, and my risk ratio and my effect estimate of my all 3 included studies. So it will be automatically done for you. This is the same for my actual duration of cold, and this is the same. And my risk of bias. So that really completes my overview on how to export your data from Covidence and import it into RevMan Web. So I'm just going to go back to the slides now and talk on the next steps of really, I want to take you through other export options as well that we support. So next is the what we support is exporting your data from extraction 1 in a machine readable CSV format, which also opens in an Excel sheet. But this export format puts all of your consensus extracted data from all the studies into one single spreadsheet. And it's just the name is saying machine readable. It's really just to do with the goal of this format is to facilitate the import of the data extracted in Covidence into statistical programs like such as Stata, R, or SPSS. And this is how it really will look like. You'll see all your data of all your studies and their intervention data in rows and how they would look like in all the actual text fields in separate columns. I will just demo this just in a bit. Next is the human readable Excel sheet, and which is what's really different about that is it puts all the extracted data from each study into a sheet in an Excel spreadsheet. So each sheet is exactly how this is actually how it will look like. So each sheet, as you can see from different study, has a section heading similar to those in Covidence extraction form. And the consensus data will be displayed at the top of each sheet, followed by each of the reviewers' individually extracted data. Next is when using extraction 1 tool as well, Covidence will continue to support the ability to transfer extracted data from Covidence to RevMan 5. And when you have completed your consensus stage as well for both your quality assessment and data extraction for each of your included study, and you're ready to export your data to the review manager, then this will still be available. So you will only be asked at that point to export the actual information and then populate your RevMan 5 file as well, to populate it into your once you choose the file to actually populate all this data, and then you export it outside of Covidence. So that the downloaded file will be in an XML format, which is as well that RevMan 5 supports, and then can be opened using the RevMan 5 by going to the File, Open in RevMan 5 section, and then you choose to download the XML file from your local drive. So Covidence will continue to provide this export format, but just please be aware that this is there's no longer any integration between RevMan 5 and RevMan Web. So I'm just gonna do some demo regarding these exports. Okay, so again, I go to my export button tool here, and again, I will choose, so instead of going to export to RevMan 5 or RevMan Web, I just go to export to file. So you'll see that you can export reference list, integrator reliability, but at the end, you can export the data extraction information from your review in Covidence. So the CSV is the actual form that you can use and open an Excel sheet, but this will produce the actual machine readable format, which will open all in one sheet as I just demonstrated in the slides. So I'm just going to download this and just open it for you now in Excel, so you'll see how it will look like. So here you have the actual, again, study names, and also then the actual, for each study there and the interventions. So in this case, if I only see the vitamin C, this means that there's an effect estimate that was actually reported instead against the reference arm, which is in this case placebo. You'll see all the actual information exported in separate columns for in the interventions, frequency, and the duration, let's say, of hold, etc. So all my effect estimate information. So this is my actual effect estimate and the placebo as well, which is my reference arm. Oops. And then if I have arm level data, so they will appear for each study. So vitamin C have a row, and the placebo will have a row as well. And next is the actual Excel, which is also a form that will just open different sheets of separate studies in only one sheet. So I will just also demonstrate this quickly. So I can just click on it. It's because it's just in an Excel directly. So I'm just gonna wait for it to. Oops. Sorry. Okay. 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 So now it's just open. So we have the actual studies, but each study, as you can see, the 3 studies are separately extracted and their information are separate. So this is all the information on how they were presented with the headlines in Covidence extraction 1 as well. Okay. So yeah, that's really it. It completes the overview of the export options all in that we actually provide for extraction 1. And now I'm going to hand it back to my colleague Laura, where she's going to take us through the new features that are coming soon for extraction 1. Back to you, Laura.
Okay, I'll keep this section brief so that we have time after this to take as many of your questions as we possibly can. Covidence is investing heavily in improving our data extraction offering. We want to make data extraction easy, we want to make it fast, and we want to enable you to transfer data smoothly between systems. So of course, this is a huge challenge. We're taking things step by step and trying to bring in small but meaningful change in that step-by-step fashion to really help sort of chip away at this huge challenge, as I say, that faces the systematic review community as we see it. So lots of the things that are happening in data extraction 1 will essentially bring the tool in line with some of the features that are already available in data extraction 2, which we think is going to make data extraction 1 simpler and more intuitive. So the first thing that we're going to launch very soon is to have the data extraction and the quality assessment templates be separate from the studies themselves. So at the beginning, I told you that the first study that you extract data for in Covidence Data Extraction 1 at the moment will be your template. Under the new feature, the template will be completely independent from the studies, and we think that's going to make things clearer and easier to follow. So if you look on this screenshot, it's the templates that are circled in red on the right of the screen. The second change is that template changes are going to now apply to all studies, instead of the situation that we have currently where you update the template, but that will not apply retroactively to studies that you've already extracted data for. In the future, the template changes are going to be applicable to every single study, whether you've started work on it, whether you haven't started work on it, is going to apply to everything. So those are just a couple of things that we hope are going to make your life easier. Just a bit more detail on those. Just click to the next slide, Gita, thanks. So this is a bit of detail, the data extraction template. You see you can extract identification, methods, population, interventions. Those are set up for you and they're in a standard format, but what you can do in each of those is add your own additional data fields if you need them. And then if we go and have a look at the quality assessment under the new template that we're going to launch, this is very similar to the sorts of data that you extract at the moment. So you will select to use the Cochrane Risk of Bias version 1 template or create a custom template, very much as you can at the moment. You'll be able to add, edit and delete domains. And as before, you'll be able to apply those domains to multiple outcome groups. So the main difference again here is that this template will sit completely independently of the studies that you are working on. Okay, a very quick word about our beta testing community. This is an invitation to all of you. We want to collaborate with you to test and validate our new data extraction features. Anything that we do bring forward for beta testing will have been thoroughly and very carefully tested by us in-house, but what we could really use is your input on how this works in the real world, if you like, so that we can essentially get your feedback and make sure that we work hard here to give you the best possible user experience. So here's a QR code, do scan that and get involved if you're interested and if you have the time. We'd love to have your input. Okay, we're going to end with a poll, I think, which is sort of, having watched the webinar, how confident you now feel about export. I know we've covered a lot today, but if you could just rate whether you're not confident, somewhat, or very confident, that would give us a little indication of how today's session has gone. So we'll just give you a few seconds to answer that. Excellent. Thanks for your input, everybody. I can see that coming up for 60% of you voted, so I'll give that a couple more seconds before we close it. This is a useful metric. It helps us when we're planning future sessions. Yeah, we'll close that now. Thank you. Okay, so can we go back to the slides then, Gita? There are a few links here to, for example, our knowledge base, the email address. If you've got any questions that you want to write into us after this session about how things work, do feel free to get in touch with us. That completes the overview, but we'll go to questions now and see if we can answer anything useful during the remainder of the hour.
Hi, Delindia and Razia. So can you let us know if there's any pending questions? Thank you.
Yes, thanks Geeta and Laura for the great session. So there were a lot of questions that I've answered. There are a few maybe where you could give further feedback on. So one of the questions is that, is it possible to export only 3 CSV leaving ROB? As ROB2 is basically the new version and old ROB is no longer used. So yes, can you export only 3 CSV?
Yes, so actually, yes, you can only export, yes, this is definitely a great question, thank you. Yes, it is possible only to export the study information, study results, and study arms, the CSVs. You can definitely completely ignore the risk of bias, so you can actually not complete risk of bias in extraction 1. You just leave the actual form empty, but you resolve the consensus for an empty form just to make sure that the studies are in the complete list. But then you will only be able to produce only the 3 CSVs at that point if you wish to use the risk of bias 2. The second thing about the risk of bias 2 that we actually do not support it yet, but actually RevMan Web, they can enable this into RevMan Web itself, so you can contact support, Cochrane support, to enable the risk of bias 2 template in RevMan Web, and then you can complete it inside RevMan Web separately from Covidence. But you can absolutely export only 3 CSVs. You do not have to export the 4 CSVs.
Thanks, Geeta. And there are a few questions about can RevMan be used for diagnostic accuracy studies? Can it be used for scoping reviews? So I've responded a few. Maybe you can give a bit of your insights on that.
Thank you, Rosie. Yes, actually, having actually attended the recent webinars on Cochrane on RevMan Web, so there's a lot of questions that actually were about if RevMan Web supports diagnostic accuracy studies or observational studies, and this is something that is work under progress. And I think if you need more information about that, especially if it's only in RevMan Web, I would completely recommend contacting support@cochrane.org. But this is definitely, and we can just put that in the chat for you all, everyone. If you have any specific RevMan question, RevMan Web is specific to do with supporting your study type, not like in the case it's not an intervention review, you can always contact their support team, and they will definitely support and answer your questions. But knowing that is something that there are some work in progress around that area. Thanks, Razia.
Great. Thank you, Geeta. At what stage of the review can we use Covidence after getting title registration with Cochrane? So basically, you can use Covidence from importing your references until your data extraction. Finally, after data extraction, you can export your references further and do your analyses. And then there were a few questions about if we can get the question answers of the session as well along with the recording or the slides. Do you have that?
Sure. So a kind of transcript of the questions that have been asked today along with the answers. Yeah, we can provide that. What we'll do is I think the most the best way to do that would probably be to add them as slides to the end of the presentation, and then all the slides will be made available on our knowledge base. If you go within the next 24 hours to support.covidence.org and click on previous webinars, then there'll be a link to this, and there'll also be a link to the slides, and we'll include the Q&A in those so that you have them to refer to. Yeah.
Thanks, Laura. Actually, yes. So one thing I wanted to mention as well is exploring our knowledge base. So you can always access our knowledge base through the question mark icon here at the top right. And our recording will actually be available after the session, along with the slides on this page, the recent webinars page. So we will definitely going to include the questions and answers then in the slides for that matter.
Gita, could you also show, while you're on the knowledge base, the article how to upload articles to RevMan Web? Because I posted that in the chat, but I believe it wasn't hyperlinked, so it would be useful to just call it out here and show people how they can find that.
Yes. Okay, so
this one? Yeah,
yes. So this is exactly the guide as well that is hyperlinked once you start exporting to RevMan Web. It will also be available there, but also if you want to access through the knowledge base directly, this is exactly the step-by-step process that I went through today. It explains exactly in details how you need to go through this process, and there's an overview article on what does the process of importing the data into RevMan Web really look like, and some links to actually RevMan Web's knowledge base as well, and so on, if you need to know more about this feature. And of course, we have more information on exporting the data into extraction one using Excel. So the ones that we also went through today using the machine readable CSV as well, or the human readable Excel sheet as well. So in this case, if you need more information as well, not only about the exporting information from Covidence, but also about anything to do with Covidence functionalities, in the home section, there's actually guides on and step-by-step processes and video tutorials on each section of the platform, from account setup to setting up the reviews to exporting your data. And for any upcoming webinars as well, you can always log into this page as well. And we have some actually taking place very soon. So I'm just going to show that on the slide. So we're going to share the slides as well, because we have some knowledge base articles from Covidence and RevMan Web as well, knowledge base. And so we're having a webinar on machine learning in systematic reviews, and this will take place in June, end of June, around 10 a.m. UK time. So if you're very much interested on the new features on machine learning in Covidence and what's really coming soon, you can always register. And along with another more step-by-step guides and segmented webinars similar to this one today about exporting. We're having one on extracting data and quality assessment in extraction 2, which is the other version of extraction that we support, and the one in July about our full text retrieval and the live demonstration of the bulk upload PDF process in Covidence. So you can always register and use the upcoming webinar page, or once we share the slides in our knowledge base, you can always just register using these links as well.
Great, thanks, Gita.
Thank you, Razia.
So there are just a few more questions. So one is about users doing animal-based studies, and so they're using a different risk of bias tool. So does Covidence allow modifying its extraction process?
Yes. So in the case you would like to use, let's say, risk of bias that is not, let's say, risk of bias version 1, you can, there's a section, once you start extraction 1, there's a section that say custom template. So you can actually use that and enter your own actual quality assessment tool, but make sure that anything added as domains and judgments or anything to do with your quality assessment tool needs to exactly match the ones in RevMan Web, if you choose to use extraction 1 as well.
Yeah. Generally, we kind of recommend extraction 2 if they're using a different quality assessment tool.
Yes, if it's not intervention reviews, we recommend using extraction 2 quality assessment. However, if it's I mean, because extraction 2 quality assessment supports all type of reviews, including intervention reviews. But if their animal-based studies are based on also intervention reviews, and they have a quality assessment tool, let's say, that is different than the Cochrane risk of bias, but also assess the quality of randomized control trials, as an example, they can use the custom template option in extraction 1.
Great. Thank you. And the last question is a RevMan an online software that facilitate someone is doing their social sciences review, so they're asking is can RevMan facilitate, does it only facilitate biomedical research using statistical approaches, or can they use it for their social science research as well?
Yes, I believe it's more to do with medical research, but I think the right persons as well, I would recommend that they contact support@cochrane.org, and they will give more information around that, but it's mostly used in health research at the moment, and mainly intervention reviews.
Great, thanks, Gida. We can wait maybe a couple more minutes if there are more questions.
Sure. Thank you, Razia, and thank you, Delindia, for fielding questions today. And just one thing again, for everyone, that you will definitely receive a recording of this session just 24 hours from the session, so hopefully tomorrow. And what you'll also receive automatically is a certificate of attendance and a survey as well to complete if you would like to. And yes, that's really it for us today. Yeah, I can see.
There are a few questions coming in. Can mixed method studies can be screened using Covidence?
Yes. I mean, it depends. I mean, Covidence is it supports all types of reviews, so you can have qualitative and quantitative at the same time inside your review studies, and that you can always assess and screen these and even extract their data. But we definitely recommend that you use extraction 2 in this case. But yeah, we definitely support that kind of as well studies.
There's this one last question on where are you? We're using this for clinical practice guideline development. Is there a webinar support that's specifically geared towards this process? Clinical practice guideline development.
Yes. So is it for the purpose supporting it to export from Covidence into RevMan Web, or only that if we support clinical practice guideline development in Covidence? I just need some, yes. But in the case of if they're interested on only how we can support and as a Covidence platform, the clinical practice guideline development, we will probably have something in the future to do with that as a webinar, and we can provide more information on how we can support this as well feature in Covidence. Yes, this is something we can definitely feed into our to my colleagues, and we can actually prepare something for this purpose.
Yeah, and if there's anything in the meantime, particularly related to your work on clinical practice guideline development that we can help with, then do just get in touch by email to support, and we'll see what we can do there.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Razia. Is there any more questions? Everyone, and thank you, Razia and Delindia, for supporting us today. Thank you, Laura, and thank you everyone for your time, and we hope that you actually found this useful. And again, if you have any more questions, you can always contact us at support@covidence.org, where myself, Laura, and Razia and Delindia and the rest of my team will be happy to help you at any time regarding anything in using Covidence. Have a nice rest of your day, and thank you so much for your time. It was a pleasure. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.